What's up everyone? My name is Erik Sellman, I'm a senior at the College of Business, and I'm here to give you some tips on how to perfect your pitch when preparing for the upcoming Entrepreneurship TREP Expo on April 11th and the upcoming Launch Your Venture competition on April 18th. Preparing a pitch for your idea is perhaps the most important thing when selling your good or service. It's important to remember that you should practice your pitch before you present it to investors. By using these 5 tips, courtesy of our own Dr. Scott Ambrose, you should be in pretty good shape. So let's jump right into it. Number 1, you want to make sure that you define your style. There are all sorts of different types of pitches and there are all sorts of different types of ideas. So you want to make sure that your pitch correlates with the idea that you're presenting to investors. Do you want to go with something called a Pixar pitch, which is very concise and to the point? Or do you want to go with something more like a question pitch, which presents a question to the investor and gets them to start thinking about in their own head how your idea could be beneficial to them? Dr. Ambrose says that you want to make sure your idea is very clear and that you exchange some type of dialogue with investors, so that way you can create a conversation and really start to convince them that your idea is a good idea. Your pitch should address these main things. First, it has to give an overview of your idea. Second, it has to acknowledge a problem that you're solving. Third, you want to make sure that you have a pretty good business structure in mind. And lastly, you have to have some ideas on funding, how you plan to fund, how much money you're going to need, and what your long-term goals are for funding. Tip number 2, you want to make sure that you're communicating the value of your proposition. If people don't see any value in your idea, they're just not going to want to invest in it. So you want to make sure that your idea shows that it does have a place in society. You also want to address your competition. How do you stand up against your competitors? What competitive edge do you have against them? The whole idea is to convince investors that you're unique and that you're bringing something to the table that has yet to be done in the industry. According to the expo criteria, you want to make sure that you're communicating your idea's general commercial viability, general interest, and innovativeness. Tip number 3, try your best to make your pitch as personable as possible. Maybe you could share the story about how you came up with your idea, or you could talk about why it's so important to you. If investors are listening to pitches all day that are just about numbers and market share, having a little bit of anecdotal evidence in your pitch will help you stand out amongst the crowd. This also helps your pitch be more memorable to them. If they listen all day to a bunch of pitches that are just about numbers and market share, they're more likely to blend those together and not exactly remember who said what. Tip number 4, you want to make sure that you know your numbers. According to Dr. Ambrose, this is where most people tend to fall when presenting their ideas to investors. You want to be able to define your market as specifically as possible. You want to know how much market share your competitors have. How much market share will you be able to take? What's your long-term plan for market share? About what percentage of your customers do you think will be repeat customers or one-time customers? How can that affect your potential return on investment? And always make sure to be realistic with the numbers. A new venture can really only take so much market share in so much amount of time. You definitely want to be hopeful about your idea, but you also have to remember to stay realistic. And finally, for our 5th and final tip, you want to make sure that you end with a call to action. Basically, ending with a call to action tells potential investors how they can support you, where they can expect to buy your product or service, and how they can contribute to future research and development. And if you have any other questions regarding your pitch or entrepreneurship in general, feel free to stop by Dr. Ambrose's office. And for all of those that are going to be participating in the TREP Expo or the Launch Your Venture competition, best of luck. And remember, practice makes perfect.